if we didn't have Islam, would we have suicide bombers?
Sure, because you've had suicide bombers. The Sri Lankans who are the Tamil Tigers were Hindu, and they invented this suicide belt.
And the vest.
So it's and the vest and all of that, exactly.
So let's go to Libya today. The mad dog, as he's called, Gaddafi, 40 years ruling. The people say enough is enough, and he's killing his own.
Yep.
And says, and his son says, he will continue to do that.
Yeah, they're going to stand tough and stand tall until the moment they don't. And I think, to me, it's very clear that the balance is already tipped against him. I don't think he can stay in power in Libya any further. There's bound to be some kind of coup. But, you know, you talk tough like Mubarak did, talk tough down to the last hour, and then he turned around and left.
And he's not in Venezuela. The rumor was he'd gone to Venezuela. We don't think he's there.
Mubarak
this is Gaddafi.
Gaddafi, yeah.
Said that he may have gone to Venezuela, but that doesn't appear to be so. How does that work in that country? And I don't know if you're an expert on Libya specifically, but the military and the military don't necessarily run Libya, is my understanding. The militia are more powerful, or
well,
how
it's
does
a very
work?
tribal society, so you have militias essentially based on regional and tribal forces, and that is one of the mainstays of the regime, that you can always count on that tribe, which benefits from the regime, to come in and support the regime. But at some point, you know, if there's enough people rising up on the streets and rebelling, even armies will hesitate before you start killing too many people. I fear it will be bloodier, but I think his days are very clearly numbered.
And there were 2 pilots who refused to bomb their own and sought asylum in Malta. And that could just be the beginning.
And there have been some diplomats. I believe the Libyan ambassador to the UN has quit, and many others around. So it's really crumbling, and it's about time. Where
does the UN Security Council fit in this? I know they're meeting, and I think perhaps China and Russia are saying, no, this is a domestic dispute. We should stay out of it.
Yeah, I actually think they're correct in this, because if we, again, especially the West or the United States, goes rushing in to try to fix it or to put our own guy in or control the outcome of this, we are going right straight back to the very problems that we're now facing.
And again, the big question is, what constitutes acceptable violence? Not genocide, but occupied people in war have a right to armed resistance at some level.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's very hard to argue against armed resistance to foreign occupation in your own country. Now, if you start carrying the war to the enemy's own country, in this case to the United States, as bin Laden did, then you're getting into much more tenuous ground. So that expands the war. But I don't think very many people doubt the right to resistance against foreign occupation, even if the U.S. calls it terrorism.
Yes, and that's very interesting about zero tolerance, the rhetoric around terrorism. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, Fanny,
Bush stance on zero tolerism in a contemporary world.
That's not a realistic position. There's simply, all over the world, some degree of political violence is used internally, either by regimes or by people struggling against the regimes. So, yes, ideally, in an ideal world, there's no violence, there's no crime, there's no nothing. But I think when deep grievances and high degree of radicalization, that's the important part, really radicalized populations, you're going to get it until the conditions begin to subside, foreign troops leave, and people start dealing with their own problems. I mean, you know, there's a lot of concern that maybe some, oh my God, Islamists might take over in one place or another. In some places they will, and they are not necessarily all wildly radical. They differ from place to place. These movements are evolving. That's, to me, what's very important. Turkey now has an incredibly good government that comes right out of Islamist roots. There are other countries with the Muslim Brotherhood. I know there's a lot of sucking in of breath, and we, oh my God, the Muslim Brotherhood. But actually, this movement has had no violence in over 50 years. It's deeply integrated into society and running political candidates and all this kind of thing. We may not like every policy they have, but that's not our prerogative. The main thing is I don't think anybody believes that they are going to be a really violent, even like an Iran, say.
And it's very difficult for us in the West, not for you particularly because you're a scholar, but for us who to understand the roots of Muslim Brotherhood. I had Tariq Ramadan on,
Oh, yeah.
and his grandfather started the Muslim Brotherhood,
right.
and we talked about it extensively, and I believed him because I really didn't know any better. And I'm not saying he wasn't telling me the truth. I'm
Right.
saying I have not been there. I don't really understand the roots. I haven't studied it.
Yeah.
So who do I trust?
Well, I don't know whether it's a matter of trust, but I think when in Muslim societies, the source of their political and social and moral values come out of Islam, not out of the American Constitution or the French Revolution. They come out of Islam. So it's not surprising that when there are resistance movements or opposition movements, political movements even, that they would reach for Islamic rhetoric to justify it. It's comfortable to people, they're familiar with it. So it is not surprising that we will find, we do find today, Islamist movements among the leading political organizations against present authoritarian regimes. There are other forces, and Islamists, if they ever come to power, are going to have to deliver to the populations themselves in terms of what they want. But I don't think we should panic automatically.
Okay, and in this day and age, the people will keep them accountable, we hope, because of social media and the power of the internet and the power of
That's right.
connection. When we come back, we'll talk about that. A World Without Islam, Graham Fuller, our guest. He is a former vice chair of the National Intelligence Council at the CIA. Graham Fuller, our guest. He's a former CIA operations officer. He worked for RAND Corporation for 12 years, something like that.
Something
What
like
did you
that.
do with RAND?
I was doing research on Islamic movements, Middle East politics.
Same old, same old.
Same old, it's in the blood.
Okay. The power of new media, the power of social networks today to change the world, to affect what's going on in the world.
Yeah, tremendously exciting, I think. This is not to say that you can't have revolutions and revolts and rebellions without the social media, but clearly this greatly facilitates it. So, and we see today the demonstration effect, I'd say not just social media, but the power of Al Jazeera, this cable
Yes.
satellite news service, that now everybody in the entire world, and especially in the Middle East, can see what's going on in neighboring countries. So I would probably put that right up at the top. When you see what's happening next door, it encourages you to take some action locally.
Yes.
And that's the demonstration effect more than anything.
Of course, and when CNN can't get the story, or ABC can't get the story, or CBC can't get the story because everything's being shut down.
That's right.
In Libya, no cell phones, no internet, no journalists. Some brave citizen is Skyping from
Right.
her apartment
Yeah.
and feeding
Yeah.
to the major networks. It's
really inspiring.
Really inspiring.
Absolutely.
It really is. So the key, I guess, is to stop the radicalization of youth in the world. What are the key factors that radicalize, in your opinion?
Well, today, as you probably know, there's what is called a youth bulge, which means that the proportion of young people, teenagers, say between 10 and 25 years old, is huge now compared to anything in the West. So you've got a lot of young people, don't have jobs, the economies are poor, they have no particular outlet, there's no freedom of expression particularly. There's a lot of anger about what they see taking place with the Palestinian situation and no solution there within their own countries, and they watch the U.S. Carrying war to other countries in the Middle East. So there's just real anger and frustration, and now boldness, a willingness to stand up and struggle and fight to change things, and they are.
Yes, and if we slap a terrorist label on people who revolt automatically, which we tend to do just because we're not on their side.
That's right.
It may not necessarily be the right thing, because one man's terrorist, as you know, is another man's freedom fighter.
You took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly right. It's very, very subjective, and generally we want people in power who are going to support Western policies. Now that's understandable, but what price do you pay for trying to do it. The U.S. has talked about favoring democracy and supporting democracy for a long time, but when the people choose leaders that Washington doesn't like, they backed away and even tried to overthrow them.
So if you could sit with President Obama today and give him some advice, what would you tell him? What would you suggest?
I'd suggest that it's time to leave the area to the people of the region, pull out the military, end these wars. The huge majority of Muslims don't want to have terrorism going on in their own countries. But when you have foreign troops stationed there, occupying the country in effect, that's a natural opportunity for the radicals to say, you see, we're struggling against this occupation. Once the occupation is gone, it cuts the ground out from under the bin Ladens and everybody else. As the revolt in Egypt has done. They brought in a government that's not what bin Laden would like, certainly. So I think it does.
Sure, but going back to Mubarak was an ally of the United States of America, on side in the Arab world. Wouldn't you worry if you're the leader of a country that perhaps your leader, their leader may not be on your team?
I'm not sure that we're in a world of teams anymore, Fanny.
Okay.
I think we're talking about, the whole idea of an ally, and there's constant reference to this, that, or the other leader was an ally. Okay, but it meant that they were essentially carrying out policies that most of the people in the country didn't want. The United States has got to learn to live in a world where there's more than one center of power. And we're going to deal with countries according to their own interests and not according to U.S. interests.
So as not to exacerbate the problem. And Canada would be there, and Mexico would be there, other countries would be there
exactly.
too, I'm
And that's my hope for Canada, is that it's going to find there are huge opportunities for independent action in this country. Independent from the United States, independent from NATO or whatever else, just acting as it sees its interests and its values in the world.
Well, as you know, with the invasion of Iraq, we differed.
Yep, that was great.
With the United States, so it's possible, and we're still friends.
Yep, and they haven't invaded.
Exactly. So it's all good. What do you want people to take home from a world without Islam?
Basic takeaway from this is that that Islam is not the nature of the basic nature of the problem. If you say Islam is the problem, then you're dealing with an almost insoluble issue. Oh my God, it's culture, it's religious, you can't ever change them, it's them, it's their culture, it's not us. If you say the problem is not Islam, it's all these other factors of anger and resentment and past events, then you realize, hey, this is a two-way street. We've got to alter some of our policies and reach some kind of accommodation here rather than simply dumping it on others.
Okay, so tonight you'll be at Simon Fraser University Harbor Center.
That's correct.
6 p.m. In dialogue.
Correct. Yes.
Well, nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, Penny.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Graham Fuller, A World Without Islam. He's an adjunct professor at Simon Fraser University.